Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our next speaker is John O'Regan. John is Director of the AECOM Group based in their Galway office, and he has responsibility for the three AECOM regional offices in Galway, Limerick and Cork. AECOM at the moment, due to recent takeover and merger activity, has over 100,000 employees worldwide, including architects, engineers, designers, planners, scientists and management and construction professionals. They serve clients currently in more than 150 countries around the world, and AECOM is ranked as the #1 engineering design firm internationally in terms of its annual revenue in the recent engineering news record magazine's annual industry rankings. John himself has over 25 years experience in the construction and property industry. Has been with the wider AECOM company since 1995. John's a qualified project and cost manager and has extensive experience in both the private and public sector, and has played the lead role in delivery of many well-known large and complex projects in Ireland. John's developed a particular public sector specialism with a focus on the procurement of large complex projects for both traditional and PPP routes. As managing partner for the Galway, Limerick and Cork teams, John is responsible for delivery of a range of projects and cost management services to both private and public sector. I'll now invite John to give his considered appraisal of our industry and its current prospects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. And first of all, I'd like to say that I didn't write that thing that Martin just said, so he must have Googled all that exciting stuff about me and AECOM. But first, I'd like to thank Martin and thank GMIT for arranging this conference again. I think this is the fifth year. I first presented at this conference in 2010, and as the Minister identified, it was a very different time then. I always try and be positive in the presentations that I give, but it was a struggle at that stage. So I'm pleased to say that we can be genuinely positive this year. So what Martin has asked me to talk on is an overview of the construction industry and some of the key issues that are out there. It's very pertinent timing because AECOM every year publish a review of the construction industry, and that's going to be published next week. So if anybody wants to get a copy of that, if you want to leave your contact details and email address or something, I'll make sure that it gets sent out to you. But what you'll see now is some of the information that's in that document. So I'm going to give a kind of overview of the construction industry. I'm going to focus on some of the key sectors, some of the sectors that are particularly exciting at the moment: the foreign direct investment sector, the Dublin commercial market, and I'm afraid that you probably will hear the word Dublin quite a lot in my presentation. It is a reality that that's where a lot of the growth is at the moment. I am confident that it's going to spread out of Dublin, but that's where it is focused at the moment. Then the bedrock of the Irish construction industry, the public sector programme, talk a little bit about that. The industry is very different now than it was a number of years ago. And I think the Minister identified that in terms of regulation that's coming through. Information technology is also moving very fast, so I'm going to touch on that and how that's changing the face of the industry, and then just kind of summarise and think about what it means for us, people who are working in the industry, people who are students hoping to go out and work in the industry, and educators in the industry. So that's what I'm going to run through. This slide is probably quite a familiar slide. It indicates construction output from around 2006 going up to 2020 and beyond. It shows the peak of construction output around 2006, 2007, when construction output in Ireland was at around 40 billion. It shows where we were around 2010, 2011, when these conferences started, where we were very much at the trough. There'd been a rapid decline, and the industry was in a very difficult position. Construction output was around the 7 billion. What it also shows is that from that point through 2013, 2014, there has been slow growth, and that the industry is starting to grow. And probably the pace of growth in 2015 will be at a faster pace again. We're forecasting construction output growth of between 12 and 15% in 2015. The green line on this chart shows what people would consider to be an appropriate level of construction output for a mature economy. Economists might say that construction output should be around 12% of gross national product, which would put the sensible level for construction output in Ireland of around the 20 to the 25, growing to the 25 billion mark. So as you can see where we are now, it's here, 2014, going into 2015, with the growth we're expecting in 15. We're still a long way short of what is probably the appropriate level of construction output. And when you add to that the deficit in terms of supply that's been built up, well, there hasn't been that much work going on, one can see how it's clear that continued growth is very, very likely. This graph indicates what it would look like if it was 10% per annum growth. And that gets us to round about where the market should be, around about 2021. So there's potentially a number of years growth there. And the bottom half of the slide indicates what that means for construction employment. And as the Minister said, there's about 116,000 people employed in the industry at the moment, and that will grow. So that just indicates the construction employment. And to look at the breakdown of the industry, what sort of work is going on in this 10 billion that was carried out in 2014 and this growing amount. The civil and infrastructure sector continues to be the biggest sector by value. That's roads, that's energy, that's waste, that's wind farms, that's rail. Those areas continue to be the largest element of the industry. In some ways, it's quite surprising to see that the second, or you might think it quite surprising to see that the second largest sector is the residential sector, when there isn't a whole heap of new housing development going on. But this output isn't just new capital projects, it's repairs, it's maintenance, it's one-off houses. And the housing stock is huge, and as such, that housing market continues to be big. Smaller projects at the moment, but continues to be big. Then towards the kind of the right-hand side of the slide, you see the solid public sectors, the education, health, government spending, and then the pink wedge towards the left, resources and industry, the foreign direct investment things I'm going to talk about in a minute, and then the commercial sector, the blue sector that you see there, a growing sector, and the commercial office sector being a very exciting sector at the moment. So that's kind of what the industry looks like at the moment. To talk a little bit about foreign direct investment, this is international companies investing in Ireland, bringing their facilities to Ireland. The largest of the foreign direct investors into Ireland is very much the US. The American Chamber of Commerce, which is the body that represents American businesses in Ireland, published this report last week, the Irish-US Economic Relationship 2015 report, and that generates some statistics that just add evidence to what I think we can see is happening anyway. This slide represents the destinations for US investment in the first 3 quarters of 2014. So what that shows, and Ireland is there at the top at over 35 billion. The UK second at just over 20 billion. So what that shows is that US foreign direct investment, more of it is going to Ireland than any other country. And you can see that by the businesses that are in Ireland. There are over 800 American companies that have their European headquarters in Ireland. And this is a list of you probably can't read that, but this is a list of the top 20 exporting companies in Ireland. And you see the big names in there. Number 1, Google, and Apple, and Intel, and all those other big IT companies are in that list. It's also important not just to indicate the scale of foreign direct investment, but also that it's continuing to grow. This is then it gives the US investment year by year over the last 20 or so years. So it is continuing to grow year on year as well. So what does that mean? I suppose one of the most visible things is the changes in Dublin around the docks, where Google have gone, where Facebook have gone. The face of that area of town has changed dramatically. It's a very young, it's a very vibrant area. This is the tech map of Dublin. It's out of date already. Doesn't have LinkedIn there. LinkedIn are opening their European headquarters. Doesn't have Yahoo. Yahoo have gone in on the North Docks. So that is continuing to grow. And Galway has its own tech map. If people say that Dublin is the Silicon Valley, Galway is theoretically the San Francisco Bay Area in relation to international technology. I can tell you're convinced. But there is a lot of activity here as well. HP just opened their new European software headquarters, and more work going on out in the IDA Park in Parkmore with developments for IT companies. So that's kind of showing the level of demand for space, and particularly for office space. And we see that a lot of that is Dublin focused, but the announcement last week of the huge Apple data center coming into Athenry shows that it is starting to move outside of Dublin as well. So that is the demand side of that sector, if you like. In terms of supply, and particularly in Dublin, there was a lot of vacant property. So in 2010, there's 300,000 square feet of vacant office space in central Dublin. And if you look at the level of take-up that's happened over the last number of years and the way that that's declined, you can see how the demand for office is now outstripping office space is now outstripping supply in Dublin, and it's moved from vacant offices being fitted out to now people, if they want big offices, they have to build them from scratch, and that's what's happening in Dublin now. So in terms of rents, what does that mean? People are saying that rents for central Dublin office space is going to be at €55 a square foot by the end of this year. People are saying that it might go to €65 a square foot by the end of next year. And then people may say that it might fall away then as supply starts to meet demand. But those rents are getting very high. When you look at the shortage of residential property and rentable property in Dublin, you can see how Dublin is getting hot, and one would hope that with rents regionally and in Galway and Cork and places like that at less than half those levels, and accommodation much easier to get, you would hope that that level of investment will come outside of Dublin as well. So I just want to kind of run through the kind of, and there's a parallel track to this, the demand in the industry, and that's what's happening to the kind of property sector, which has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. So we went from kind of 2006 Celtic Tiger years, where there were fantastic development opportunities out there, lending was freely available, and huge developments were being built everywhere. This is a bit of an icon for the boom-bust scenario. This is the Anglo-Irish Bank headquarters on the North Keys, which got to this point and then stopped for a number of years. So loans went into default. The assets became distressed assets under the control of NAMA, under control of the banks, and under control of the receivers appointed by them. It did take a few years for the banks and for NAMA to look at the options for how they address these distressed assets and these distressed loans. But over the last couple of years, it's moved to the next phase where those assets have been disposed of. There have been massive sales of assets. There have been massive sales of loans. So those loans have been sold to, actually I'll go back one slide. This just gives an indication of the level of sales. So in 2014, 4.5 billion worth of property transactions, 21 billion worth of loan transactions. So a huge amount of activity in that sector. And who's buying? Private equity funds, the likes of Kennedy Wilson, Blackstone, Marathon, Irish REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, wealthy individuals You've seen the Coma brothers and others buying a lot of property around Galway, and investment funds for kind of well-let properties, investment funds like pension funds are buying. So a lot of property and a lot of loans have now changed hands. The people who own them now have got good value on what they bought, so they're looking at their options. They're looking at, can they lease? Do they need to upgrade? Have they made enough money just from buying it and holding on to it for a couple of years? Are they selling? Or are they developing? And that's what's happening now. We are starting to see that development phase where large developments are happening in Dublin again, and I think that will roll out around the country. So that's what that building looks like now. That's what it's intended to look like. That's the new central bank headquarters, which is going into that Anglo headquarters on the docks, and that's likely to start on site within the next couple of months, with the QSs and the structural engineers on that project. The site for that project, as you can see it there, in the halfway up the right-hand side of the dock there. That's the new Central Bank of Ireland headquarters building, the old frame that's there. But you can also see the extent of development land around there, a lot of which is in the control of NAMA. And NAMA are bringing that to the market bit by bit. They've got the area designated as Special Development Zone, which assists in planning. So you can see that there will be significant development coming down the line there. So if you lived in that bubble, the Dublin commercial property world, you could well convince yourself that everything is absolutely fantastic and the good times are here again. But you have to remember that that is only a proportion of the construction industry in Ireland. It's probably less than 5% of the construction industry in Ireland. And it is, I wouldn't say that it's a bubble, but it's only a proportion of what's going on. What's more important probably are the traditional bedrocks, like the public sector capital programme, and the Minister talked about that. The public sector capital programme has been, in terms of value, has been working its way down over the last number of years to around £3.5 billion. And now in the last budget, there were announcements that it was starting to come up again. So the Minister mentioned £3.8 billion for housing over the next number of years. That's spread out over a few years. But if you look at 2015, 2016, 2017, it's going up by around 100 million a year over that period, and a lot of that is in the social housing field. There is also the public-private partnership, which is off balance sheet, if you like, but it's also public sector development. So that side of things is going on. I understand the Minister is going off to meet the City and the County Council to see what social housing projects they have to start working on and bring to the market. There are challenges in ramping up the public sector programme. It's got to such a low level that there is a skill shortage. There aren't that many, or there are lesser people in the public sector who are skilled in that sector and are skilled at bringing stuff to the market. So it will take time. The number of schemes that are shovel-ready is very few, in that for a number of years there's been little, particularly in social housing, that has been brought to planning. So even projects that had planning, regulations have changed. They'll probably have to go back in for planning now. And the public sector market has been a tough industry to be in for the last few years. And when there are attractive sectors like the FDI and like the commercial office sector, contractors, consultants, and others may be looking at that sector and saying, well, look, there's more attractive work elsewhere. So there are a few challenges on the public sector side. So that's touching on the overall market and some of the key sectors, some of the exciting sectors and some of the more traditional sectors. There are a number of other things that are going to make this industry radically different for the students that are coming out over the next number of years to those who came into the industry 10 years ago. The level of regulation has rightly changed. So if you look at what's changed over the last number of years, the requirements for planning, fire certification, disabled access, building control, and we'll hear more about building control from Kevin later on today, have all brought an increased level of sophistication and regulation to the industry. In terms of people bidding for public work, Public procurement has become very complex, and there's new legislation all the time on that. The government contracts brought a new dimension to contracting, and again, they're changing again soon, and the contractor registration. So what that means is that the industry is a lot more complex now. It's probably good for the students that are in here today, because it means that there's a level of administration and a level of knowledge that is required, which probably isn't out there in the industry today. So that level of focus in terms of the paperwork associated with construction will increase. The other thing that is changing very quickly in the industry is information technology. And we've been hearing about information technology for years, and it's probably 20 years since you first heard people saying, you'll never need a QS again because you'll just press a button and the bill of quantities will come out from the computer. It still hasn't happened, but it is getting closer and things are moving faster. BIM is taking pace. I think people were afraid of BIM initially. It took a while for people to get trained up and so on. But now people are using it. People are seeing the benefits of it, and it is rapidly increasing. And the right-hand side of this slide shows that it's not just a tool for designers. It's a tool for a project. It's a tool for clients, and right through the life of the project, through to the facilities management of the project. That pace of technology isn't only affecting design, it's affecting everything. One of the things that our building surveyors are using now is iPad-based surveys, where instead of going to the site, taking your notes, taking your photographs, going away, putting them into a report, you have software that allows you to go onto site, feed in the information as you walk around the site, take the photos with your iPad as you're going around. They go directly into the report, so the report is generated automatically nearly, and this saves up to 40% in terms of the amount of time spent on individual surveys. And when there are very large surveys of huge numbers of properties to be carried out, it means it can be done very efficiently. So these are just a couple of snapshots of those. So what does that mean for the industry? Well, sometimes it feels a bit like that, in that you have all these new things landing on you in terms of regulation, in terms of technology. All of them require training, all of them require effort to understand them, and it sometimes does feel like you're pushing a large rock up a hill. But I think ultimately it means that the industry is a very exciting industry to work in. We have to be flexible, we have to look forward, we have to be strategic about where we are going to position ourselves and where our businesses are going to position ourselves in this new industry. The days of being a generalist and being able to do everything, I think, are rapidly going on any project larger than a small project. If you think about those aspects in terms of planning, fire, disabled access, if you went back 10 or 15 years ago, often an architect would do all of those things themselves on the project. Now, on significant projects, there'll be a planning consultant, there'll be a fire consultant, there'll be a disabled access consultant, there'll be a building control consultant. So that complexity brings specialism. It means that I think individuals and businesses either need to find their specialism, or they need to be part of a larger organisation which has the capability to keep up with the pace in the industry and touch on all the important areas of it. So that's kind of where AECOM are, and I think Martin's already sold AECOM enough. But in Ireland, there are 600 people in AECOM. It is a multidisciplinary business, so it has all those different degrees of specialism, from engineering, architecture, and so on. And that is increasingly attractive to a lot of companies, the foreign direct investment companies, and people building on a once-off basis. They look at the industry now, they realize the complexity of it, and they'd like to have just one person who can deal with all that for them. So I don't know how many of these faces might be familiar with you. This is just to kind of touch on the relationship that AECOM have had over the years with GMIT. Stephen Reed, Anthony Geraghty, and Dean Elcock are all graduates working in our Dublin office. Eugene, David and Colin are graduates working in our London office. And the character on the far right there, I don't know if you can see any family resemblance there, is a young Mr. Canny, who's an associate in our London office. So I think I put that up there because there's a lot of people going out into the industry now, and I just think you do need to kind of think about what's ahead in the industry and where your career path is going to take you. It is a period of change. I think it's important to keep up with that regulation, keep up with that technology. There are a lot of exciting projects out there, so it's worth focusing on in those early stages of your career, getting the right experience and getting in the right position for moving your careers forward. So what are the positives coming out of this? I think we're all clear that there is growth in output coming ahead. There's increases in employment. We are all going to be working in a more regulated and a more structured industry. Thankfully, it's also a safer industry. Health and safety has advanced over the number of years. And there are increases in opportunities for individuals and for businesses. But there are some things ahead that we need to think about. In terms of this year, 2015, there is capacity in the industry. I don't see massive shortages of people able to deliver. But if you look at the number of projects that are going to get on site this year, which are going to fill contractors' books, and then the number of new projects coming down the line in 2016, there are risks in terms of capacity. There are risks in terms of capacity of clients being able to administer a project, consultants being able to deliver, and contractors being able to deliver. So, and what's that going hand in hand with? It's going hand in hand with a diminished number of graduates coming out of the colleges. It's fantastic news that there are more people going into college in first year, and the uptake is much higher. It looks like it's going to be much higher this year. But in the fourth years coming out, the numbers aren't great, and I think those people are going to be in big demand. We need to convince those graduates to stay in Ireland. People have realised that there are exciting opportunities in elsewhere. So we need to find ways of convincing graduates to stay in Ireland. And we also need to find ways of convincing those who've travelled to come back. What other things do we need to worry about? We do need to worry about the two-tier economy, that the growth has been primarily in Dublin. I think we will see it growing outside Dublin in the future as we go forward, but it is very much a feature at the moment. So what will that push on capacity do? These are the forecasts for tender price indices for 2015 that we're forecasting in our review. We're saying that tender prices in Dublin will go up between 4 and 7%, that in the regions are more likely to go up between 3 and 5%, and that's in 2015. This graph shows tender price inflation over a longer period, going back to the 1990s. And you can see how, at some stages, tender price inflation was up at levels of 10 and 15%. And that is kind of the worry that going into 2016, you might start to see the shortage of capacity having a negative impact on construction prices and them getting higher very quickly. So that kind of concludes my presentation. I think there's only one thing that's for sure, that things are becoming more positive, and that within the construction industry, change is constant. It is a constant roller coaster, but it's a very exciting industry to be in at the moment. Thank you very much.